Shalom, everyone. This story I translated from the Hebrew for by the light of the full moon, which is the title of my third book, which God willing should be out soon, should be published soon. This took place in the 1970s, but it began before that when Yigal and Nechama, two Israelis, a man and a woman, each of whom grew up on a non-religious kibbutz in Israel, non-religious to say the least, and eventually they married, and when they had two children, who were, when they were still quite young, two children, Eitan, a boy, and Michal, a girl, they decided to move to America, the land of gold, to see if they could succeed there. They wound up in Minnesota, in St. Paul, in the Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Yigal had a very good, very nice, well-paying job, and they had a nice house. Everything was going along well, and all of a sudden, his wife Nechama was struck with a very strange disease. Without any warning, she would have hallucinations, very paranoid hallucinations. These hallucinations would last for an hour or so, and under the spell of them, she was uncontrollable. Anything could happen. It wasn't safe even for the children to be around her, and when she came out of it, she wouldn't remember anything about what had happened. And they went to doctors. No one was able to help them. It was really destroying their life, and a huge amount of pressure. Full-time job, and now he had to be the primary caretaker because it wasn't safe to leave the children alone with her, and they didn't know what to do. As I said, they had really no background in Judaism, despite being born and raised in Israel. But in desperation, Nechama decided to go to speak to Rabbi Manas Friedman, one of the Chabad rabbis in St. Paul, Minneapolis, in the Twin Cities. Today a very famous teacher, but that was in the beginning of his career in the 70s. And she explained her situation to him. And he said, well, I'm not a doctor, and I don't have magical powers, but I can give you some good advice. She was interested. He said, I advise you to write to the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn. I'm sure he will have a way to help you. So she was very, very excited to try this. She was ready to try anything. And she and her husband sat down and wrote a very emotional letter to the Rebbe describing the problem. They soon received an answer where the Rebbe told them that if they will make their home kosher and commit that the whole family will eat kosher, then this will help. This will help solve the problem. That was the whole letter. Well, Yigal and Nechama had two completely different reactions to this. Nechama got very excited. She was in such a terrible situation, she would try anything, even keeping kosher. She arranged to study about it with Rabbi Friedman's wife, Mrs. Chana Friedman, who took her to first of all took her to stores, supermarket, health food stores, to show her how to look for kashrut symbols on products so she could identify what she could buy in stores and whatnot. And she did whatever she had to do at the house in terms of changing over her kitchen to be kosher, in terms of utensils and stoves and products, and so the family was eating kosher. Yigal, however, had a problem with this. He also had no religious background, and he wasn't interested in acquiring one. Kashrut, maybe it's not that bad, but it could lead to other things. Suppose his wife became religious, what would he do? That would be a horrible change of events. perhaps, meanwhile, the hallucinations continued. Were still continuing, and he was feeling more and more desperate. One evening, he went out with some friends to just relax a little from his tense situation. And some of his friends were discussing that they had heard about this very elderly Gentile woman who was supposed to have supernatural powers. She could see the future. She helped people with all kinds of strange problems. She was psychic, and they were discussing whether they believed this or not. Is this true? Can it really be so? Is it true? Is it not true? And Yigal got very excited when he heard this. Maybe she could help them. He decided he would go to see her. She sounded like a genuine witch or whatever. He didn't know exactly how to call her, but she seemed to have great magical powers. And she also lived in the Midwest. I don't know where, somewhere in the Midwest. So he went to see her, and he explained to her his problem. And she said, she looked at him and said, "Excuse me, but aren't you Jewish?" He said, "Yes, I'm Jewish." Didn't know why she was asking, but he didn't have any problem admitting he was Jewish. She said, "Well, if you're Jewish, why don't you get in touch with the great rabbi in New York? His powers are much greater than my powers, and he really cares about all the Jewish people." He couldn't believe it. Here he came all this way to see this woman, and she admits she has powers, and yet she says that still he's better off being with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He was quite shocked, but he said to her, "Well, we already consulted with him. We consulted in correspondence." And she said, "So what did he say?" So he said that we should do the kosher diet. So she said to him, "Okay, so why don't you do it?" He said, "You don't understand. It's very difficult. There's a lot of food restrictions. There's problems with pots and pans. You can't eat in restaurants. Shopping is complicated." And she looked at him and she shrugged, and all of a sudden he realized, "What am I, crazy? Because of the supposed difficulties in kashrut, I should do something that could help my wife." So he went back home. He told his wife, "Okay, he's going to fully commit to the program. Even outside the house, he'll eat kosher." And so they both forged ahead. And soon after that, the hallucinations stopped, and they never came back. I can't tell you whether or not they became a religious family or not. I don't know, but for sure they kept up with kashrut. Hopefully also with Shabbat. But we do know that they stayed in Minnesota, and anybody who went to their house found a big picture of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the center of the living room.